Horror for Dummies TV, welcome back to another episode of Netflix films you can watch while in lockdown. Now, if you didn't check out episode 1, it is up there right now. We talked about the fun revisit films that you can check out on Netflix. Films that you probably have seen before, but they're always fun to revisit. Now on to episode 2, and we are talking about the golden age of horror cinema, and that's what many people called it. We're talking about the 80s, old school 80s on this episode, and I have a bunch of movies that I'm going to recommend to you today that are streaming on Netflix. Before I start, I must mention that this little series thing that I'm doing, it's only dedicated to Australian Netflix because I am in Australia. So if it's different over there in the States or Canada or Japan or wherever you're watching this, some of the films that I recommend may not be on your Netflix. They might be, but they might not be. So don't get upset if they're not on there. But this is for Australian Netflix people. So if you are bored during lockdown and nothing to do, here's some films that you can check out that are straight from the 80s. And why the 80s though? Why do I pick movies from the 80s? One, because there was a bunch of movies from the 80s on Netflix that I think are worth mentioning. Two, 80s fucking rules, man. Everything about the 80s is cool. The music, the style, the movies. Not just horror, I mean all types of movies. Like action, comedy, everything from the 80s rules, in my opinion. But the horror genre in the 80s was just something else, man. It was all where we grew up. Like, we grew up watching the 80s films. Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, Halloween, Hellraiser, Child's Play. All these movies, they originated from the 80s. And the biggest thing about the 80s is definitely the practical effects. I mean, can you go wrong with An American Werewolf in London, The Thing? The list goes on and on. There's so much good shit that came out of the 80s. And I'm going to give you a list here of movies on Netflix right now that you can binge watch if you want. If you are that bored during lockdown, here's some movies to ease that boredom. So we'll start with the first one. And the first one I've got is, boom, Christine. Christine is about a car that kills you. Now, before you jump down my throat and say, well, Tim, that's just ludicrous. Yeah, you're kind of right. But hear me out. This was written by Stephen King. It was directed by John Carpenter. And if you don't know those names, you need to hand over your horror card, first off. Secondly, John Carpenter directed such films as Halloween, The Thing, The Fog. You name it, he's done it. Stephen King, on the other hand, has written such books as It, Salem's Lot, and of course, Christine. They're well-known names that you probably listen to this right now going, we know who they are, shut up and get to it. So Christine is streaming on Netflix, and I think it's definitely worth your attention. Now, the synopsis sounds stupid. I'll be the first to admit it. A killer car that kills people. But we've watched movies before that you just need to set aside your brain for a second and just go with it. We've all seen those types of movies. Christine is one that falls into that category. So just shut up, turn your brain off and enjoy. Now, the thing about Christine is it's not just a car that kills people, it's the masterful filmmaking, it's the excellent John Carpenter-esque score behind it, and yes, the awesome 80s practical effects. You see a car come back to life after being destroyed, and it fucking rules! Christine, definitely worth a shot, and it's honestly not a film that I see many people talking about, so go and check it out, man. Christine fucking rocks. The next one I've got is, we're going from cars to vampires. We're talking about Fright Night. Fright Night is, in my opinion, the second best vampire movie of the 80s. I'm sorry, man, I'm a Lost Boys fan through and through. That's not, regardless of the 80s, The Lost Boys is my favorite vampire movies, hand down. Fright Night is a close second, though. Fright Night has got everything you want for an 80s horror movie. Not just an 80s horror movie, a normal horror movie. It's got awesome soundtrack. It's got unreal clothing. It's got a super sick score. It's got vampires and other things, maybe. It's got unreal practical effects, and it's got a fucking cool story that's just a lot of fun to watch, man. Fright Night is definitely worth your time. I honestly believe that it's probably one of the better movies to come out in the 80s. Standalone movies, anyway. But yes, Fright Night, if you want your vampire fix and you're sick of the Vampire Diaries or True Blood or anything like that, this is a vampire movie where they don't fuck around. These aren't vampires that want to love you and date you and stuff. They want to eat you and drink your blood. There. So Fright Night, give it a go, man. Awesome shit. The next one I've got, we'll go from cars to vampires to zombies. Now, when you think of zombies, I'm guessing most people here are going to go, oh yeah, The Walking Dead. I've seen that before. Where did The Walking Dead come from? Movies such as Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and of course the third entry in the Dead series, Day of the Dead, which is the one I'm talking about here. Day of the Dead is streaming on Netflix. It's actually streaming like every service that I've checked out. I don't know why, but yeah. In my humble opinion, and you're welcome to tell me that I'm wrong. You are welcome to say that. But in my humble opinion, Day of the Dead is the best of the original Romero trilogy. The Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and Day of the Dead. My favourite is Day of the Dead. Simply because this one still holds up. And I'm sorry to those people out there that are like, nah, Dawn of the Dead's the best. It's not. I mean, it's fine. But go back and look at it. The effects are so dated. And that's not just coming from me. Tom Savini, the man who did the fucking makeup shit, but he said it. He said it himself that the blood doesn't hold up. It looks too fluoro. It just looks strange. Day of the Dead still holds up. The effects are so masterful. I honestly put it up there with a American Werewolf in London, The Thing, that high caliber. So if you want some zombie gore from the 80s with a sick soundtrack, a really simple but interesting plot, then Day of the Dead, oh man, honestly, I say this with confidence, Day of the Dead is one of my favourite zombie films of all time. Up there for me, you got Train to Busan, Shaun of the Dead, and Day of the Dead. Like, they're the three that I fucking love. So, Day of the Dead, definitely give it a shot. We'll go to the sillier side of the 80s now with a movie about a small creature. And we're talking about the Crites here. Critters number 2. I don't know why Critters number 2 is up on Netflix and Critters, the original Critters, isn't. But it's just how they go. I don't understand the contracts and everything that Netflix does. But we got Critters 2 on Netflix. And Critters 2 is my second favourite Critters film. 3 and 4 are fine. But I don't know, there's something just a lot of fun about Critters 2. Now, if you've seen the original Critters, you know that, yes, it is comedic at times. This one, Critters 2, has a much more comedic tone to it than the first one. That's not to say that it's stupid or not worth your time, because it's a lot of fun. It has the critters doing what they do. It has the bounty hunters, and one of them turns into a really hot chick who doesn't wear a shirt. So if you want boobs, you got them. And it has the critters doing something that they didn't do in the first movie, and that's combining together in this big fucking ball and rolling while devouring everyone. And it's awesome, man. Go and check out Critters 2. This is the one that I want to rewatch because it's just a lot of fun. It's just sit back and enjoy it. Turn your brain off and just have fun watching little Crites just go nuts. Next 2 films I've got, and I'm cheating here because the next 2 films I've got are actually from the 90s. And I did this category called Old School 80s, but whatever, fuck you, I don't care. I'm too lazy to do an actual 90s category and an 80s category, so whatever. So the next one I'm going to talk about is from the 90s, as I said before, Wes Craven's New Nightmare. If you're in the mood for a Freddy Krueger film, but you don't want to watch Freddy vs. Jason, because that's the only other Freddy Krueger film on Netflix, I mean, you can always go and pop in one of your Blu-ray of Nightmare on Elm Street, The Dream Warriors or something. But if you want to strictly stay to Netflix, then Wes Craven's New Nightmare is the film for you. What's cool about Wes Craven's New Nightmare is everything. But to narrow it down, that this is a much different take on Freddy Krueger, the character, and the whole story, the whole lore, and everything like that. Now, I'm not going to get too into it because, to be honest, it's been a hot minute since I've seen this film. I don't think I've seen Wes Craven's New Nightmare for easily 10 years. And this is one that I'm going to have to rewatch because my wife has been begging me to watch this one because she's never seen it. And I think it's time for a rewatch myself. I remember digging this film. It's a lot different. Now, don't go in expecting Freddy doing the whole dream demon and stuff like that, because this is a very different story than the original film, but one that works, and one that brings Freddy Krueger back to the menacing type that they kind of got away for in the last sequels. So, if you like Freddy, and you know I do, you can see his tattoo there, Wes Craven's New Nightmare is probably one of the better Nightmare films out there, so go and check that out. Last one I've got is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Boom. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is basically a remake of the original Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein from the 30s. This is just into one big movie, really. And you got Robert De Niro playing the character of Frankenstein, the monster, sorry, not the doctor. And Hella Bonham, the girl that's in all the Tim Burton movies, you know what I'm talking about. She plays the bride. And this is a really cool take. It's not as great as the 1930 classics. I honestly don't think you'll get better than the Boris Karloff Frankenstein. They're just some of my personal favorites. But this is a definite better film than some of the sequels that we got. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is a really cool adaptation. It's set in past tense, back when the book was written. I don't know, you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, I really like this movie. I think it's cool. There's some things that I've never read the book myself, but the movie doesn't go through. Maybe the book does, I'm not too sure. But yeah, really cool look. It has a runtime of 2 hours and 7 minutes or something like that. So if you are in the mood for a longer film, something that you really have to sit down and just enjoy, not just turn your brain off, you have to actually be alert for this film, then Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is a good adaptation to the classic movie, the classic book, and I think it's worth your time. That's it, man. That's it for part 2 of Netflix films to watch during lockdown. I hope you like this video, man. I hope you like this series. If you do, give us a subscribe. Do all that stuff. You know, I'm not used to this whole shit. Like this video, comment, and tell me what other films out there on Netflix I might have missed. I did a quick scan on Netflix, and I think I got everything from the 80s and early 90s. But if there's anything that I've missed, tell me. Like, subscribe, share, all that cool stuff, man. It's really fun doing this stuff. So the more activity we get, the more I get in the mood to do these ones. So next video, we're going to be doing Hidden Gems. Films on Netflix, horror films on Netflix that most people don't talk about. And I don't know why, because there are some movies there that are worth your attention. Trust me. Wait for that video. It's going to be a lot of fun. Until then, guys, this has been Tim from Horror for Dummies. Go check out the podcast. Go do all that cool stuff. And I'll catch you down the road next episode. Boom!